All right, hey, what's up, everybody? It's Dorian Wallace here with Maderi Music. Unfortunately, there is a very serious personal situation that Marisa is going through. This week, she is out offering support for a friend in a very, very challenging situation. So just, send your positive thoughts and everything out to her on social media and just in, anyway, just however you might pass on good vibes, because she's going to need it. But anyways, this week is very exciting because we have with us Pamela Scully. And the way that I actually learned about Pamela was on Coursera. Have been kind of going through and taking a lot of these courses around areas that I'm interested in, and there's a course on understanding violence, and it, from my, outside perspective, but as somebody who participated in the course, it seemed to be a very good intersection between more the medical and clinical approach to understanding violence, as well as a more humanities-oriented form of violence. And anyways, Pamela was one of the teachers, professors for that course, and she had a section on sexual violence, and so I reached out and was like, "Hey, do you want to come on on this podcast that we do, where we cuss a lot and talk about politics and music?" And what we're going to do today is actually do a listening of a song. I have not told her what the song is, but a song that is addressing sexual violence, and just wanted to see what her firsthand reaction to it is. And with that, I'm going to pass it to you, Pamela. Introduce yourself and I guess tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much, Dorian, and I'm thrilled to be here. I'm a historian and a professor of women, gender, and sexuality studies and African studies at Emory University in Atlanta. And as you can hear from my accent, not originally from the South, at least. So, it's relevant to my study of violence and sexual violence that I was born in apartheid South Africa, which I'm happy to talk about if you'd like to, talk about that. But I, married an American and have been here for many decades. I've written books on South Africa as well as Liberia, and I guess a thread through all of them, including a book called Sarah Barpen and the Hottentot Venus, about a woman who was displayed in Europe in the early 19th century. Running through all of that has been this interest in sexual violence, and particularly how settler colonial cultures of various sorts both create impact and really sort of facilitate particular forms of sexual violence, and then also in a way how we come to understand them. And I would include, the United States as a settler colonial culture in that respect. So thrilled to be here and delighted to be participating, and a bit nervous given that I don't know the song, but I'm looking forward to it nonetheless.
Yeah, and just before we go on into the actual listening of the song, just a content warning about not only the song for its content in regards to sexual violence, but also the dialogue that is going to come after this. This is not an episode you necessarily have to listen to. But if you're intrigued to hear Dr. Scully's perspective, take a listen. But yeah, putting it out there. So I'm not going to tell you anything about this song other than that it's a hip-hop song from a really, really, really fantastic political hip-hop artist from Harlem. He's formerly incarcerated. And he's really, after he got out of his experience in prison, really became a skilled hip hop MC, specifically in the diss rap category. So he's very good at freestyling and very, very good at, I'll just say, very intense words, which you'll learn from this song. It's very, very intense lyrically. But let's take a listen, and here we go.
Once knew a nigga whose real name was William. His primary concern was making $1 million, being the illest hustler that the world ever seen. He used to fuck movie stars and sniff coke in his dreams. A corrupted young mind at the age of 13. Nigga never had a father and his mom was a fiend. She put the pipe down, but for every year she was sober. Her son's heart simultaneously grew colder. He started hanging out, selling bags in the projects, checking the young chicks looking for hit and run prospects. He was fascinated by material objects, but he understood money never bought respect. He built a reputation cause he could hustle and steal, but got locked once and didn't hesitate to squeal. So criminals he chilled with didn't think he was real. You see, me and niggas like this have never been equal. I don't project my insecurities on other people. He fiended for props like addicts with pipes and needles, and so he felt he had to prove to everyone he was evil. A feeble-minded young man with infinite potential, the product of a ghetto-bred capitalistic mental. Coincidentally dropped out of school to sell weed, dancing with the devil, smoked until his eyes would bleed. But he was sick of selling trees and gave in to his greed. Everyone trying to be trife never faced the consequences. You probably only did a month for minor offenses. Ask a nigga doing life if he had another chance. But then again, there's always the wicked that knew in advance. Dance forever with the devil on a cold cell block. But that's what happens when you rape, murder, and sell rock. Devils used to be gods, angels that fell from the top. There's no diversity because we're burning in the melting pot. So Billy started robbing niggas, anything he could do to get his respect back in the eyes of his crew. Starting fights over little shit up on the block. Stepped up to selling mothers and brothers to crack rock. Working overtime, making money for the crack spot. Hit the jackpot and wanted to move up to cocaine. Fulfilling the Scarface fantasy stuck in his brain. Tired of the block niggas treating him the same. He wanted to be major like the cutthroats and the thugs. But when he tried to step to him, niggas showed him no love. They told him any motherfucking coward can sell drugs. Any bitch nigga with a gun can bust slugs. Any nigga with a red shirt can front like a blood. Even Puffy smoked the motherfucker up in the club. But only a real thug can stab someone till they die. Standing in front of them, staring straight into their eyes. Billy realized that these men were well guarded, and they wanted to test him before business started. Suggested raping a bitch to prove he was cold-hearted. So now he had a choice between going back to his life or making money with made men. Up in the sight, his dreams about cars and ice made him agree a hardcore nigga is all he ever wanted to be. And so he met them Friday night at 2:45. Everyone trying to be trife never faced the consequences. You probably only did a month for minor offenses. Ask a nigga doing life if he had another chance. But then again, there's always the wicked that knew in advance. Dance forever with the devil on a cold cell block. But that's what happens when you rape, murder, and sell rock. Devils used to be gods, angels that fell from the top. There's no diversity because we're burning in the melting pot. They drove around the project slow while it was raining, smoking blunts, drinking and joking for entertainment, until they saw a woman on the street walking alone, 3 in the morning, coming back from work on her way home. And so they quietly got out the car and followed her, walking through the projects. The darkness swallowed her. They wrapped her shirt around their head and knocked her onto the floor. This is it, kid, now you got your chance to be raw. So Billy yoked her up and grabbed the chick by the hair and dragged her into a lobby that had nobody there. She struggled hard, but they forced her to go up the stairs. They got to the roof and then held her down on the ground, screaming, "Shut the fuck up and stop moving around." The shirt covered her face, but she screamed and clawed. So Billy stomped on the bitch till he broke in her jaw. Them dirty bastards knew exactly what they were doing. They kicked her until they cracked her ribs and she stopped moving. Blood leaking through the cloth, she cried silently. And then they all proceeded to rape her violently. Billy was made to go first, but each of them took a turn, ripping her up and choking her until her throat burned. A broken jaw mumbled for God, but they weren't concerned. When they were done and she was lying bloody, broken and bruised, one of them niggas pulled out a brand new 22. They told him that she was a witness for what she'd gone through, and if he killed her, he was guaranteed a spot in the crew. He thought about it for a minute, she was practically dead, and so he leaned over and put the gun right to her head.
I'm falling and I can't turn back. I'm falling and I can't turn back.
Right before he pulled the trigger and ended her life, he thought about the cocaine with the platinum and ice, and he felt strong standing along with his new brothers, cocked the gat to her head and pulled back the shirt cover. But what he saw made him start to cringe and stutter, cause he was staring into the eyes of his own mother. She looked back at him and cried cause he had forsaken her. She cried more painfully, and when they were raping her, his whole world stopped. He couldn't even contemplate. His corruption had successfully changed his fate, and he remembered how his mom used to come home late, working hard for nothing, cause now what was he worth? He turned away from the woman that had once given him birth, and crying out to the sky cause he was lonely and scared, but only the devil responded cause God wasn't there. And right then he knew what it was to be empty and cold, and so he jumped off the roof and died with no soul. They say death takes you to a better place, but I doubt it. After that they killed his mother and never spoke about it. And listen, cause the story that I'm telling is true, cause I was there with Billy Jacobs and I raped his mom too. And now the devil follows me everywhere that I go. In fact, I'm sure he's standing among one of you at my shows, in every street cipher listening to little thugs flow. He could be standing right next to you and you wouldn't know. The devil grows inside the hearts of the selfish and wicked. White, brown, yellow, and black color is not restricted. You have a self-destructive destiny when you're inflicted, and you'll be one of God's children that fell from the top. There's no diversity because we're burning in the melting pot. So when the devil wants to dance with you, you better say never, because a dance with the devil might last you forever.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So this was Immortal Technique, and his song is called Dance with the Devil. It is from his, I believe it's his first album, which is Revolutionary Volume 1. It's a mostly political album, a lot of social commentary in regards to actually economic policies and imperialism. But this song is one of the more, I guess, like personal stories, and it's...
When did the album come out?
This would have been early 2000s, so I believe 2001. September 14th, 2001.
Wow.
So 3 days after September 11th, 2001.
Well,
Yeah.
To say colloquially, I'm gobsmacked.
Yeah.
That was really, really excellent. Because one of the things we were talking about, you and I, before we started properly, was how to square sexual violence and the horrors of sexual violence with, I guess, my own or others' predisposition to empathy as a way to move through life. And, are there times when one shouldn't lead with empathy? At what point does one, has someone's heinous actions, one should just be judgmental and not try to be empathetic with the perpetrator, et cetera, et cetera. And I think what's so, I think maybe I can circle back to the issue of empathy if you want to, but with regard to the song, I think what's so clever about the song is he provides a narrative. So you're in the world of a child who's being abused by life and capitalism and racism and poverty and his family because of all of the above. And it sort of leads you to a place where you can understand the character doing, getting involved in terrible things. And then it gets to the point where it's so horrific, you kind of, well, I as a listener sort of felt so peeled back from empathy to like, oh my God. I just think that was brilliant. I mean, have other things to say? Do you want me to keep going? Would you like to respond?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is exactly why I wanted to talk to you. Was yeah, it's very remarkable that he does such an excellent job of explaining sort of the psychology of William and how it was all about basically trying to fit in and, with this toxic masculine perspective. But he was so blinded by that mission in his life that by the time it gets to where, because he's been chiseling away at his, we'll call it a soul in this song, but he's been chiseling away at his soul like bit by bit until it gets to this moment that really he's basically been preparing for, and it is so hideous. Like there's no I don't think anyone could listen to this song and think, oh, like that. Like once you find out what they're doing and who the victim is, and actually just to put it up, the lyric that just hit me this particular time was so it's after the act. It's at beginning of verse 4. It says, right before he pulled the trigger and ended her life, he thought about the cocaine with the platinum ice, and he felt strong standing along with his new brothers. And so this is like a fraternal moment of horror at the expense of this innocent person. And then you discover that it's his mother, and it's just
this is
yeah.
The song is so excellent because it just brings up so much. So I want to say something different to what I was going to say originally. I love your term, the fraternal moment of horror, because there's since the 1990s, when you had the war in Yugoslavia and the use of rape camps, and then in Rwanda, the genocide in which terrible sexual violence occurred. There's been it sort of, these horrors sort of invigorated a whole new literature on rape in wartime, trying to understand both, how it was partly, people sort of had, well, anyway, and one of the most impactful, I think, insights of some of this literature has been exactly what one group of researchers have called the quote-unquote brotherhood of guilt, which is that they were writing about Yugoslavia in particular, but one way in which militias, and really you can take this, militias, armies, you name it, but particularly I would say in sort of militias that are having to kind of create their own ethos, and you see this in various places in the world, is that you actually induce exactly what you were saying, this fraternal feeling, this commitment to the militia, in part through guilt, so that soldiers, militias rape in wartime and conflict for a whole variety of reasons. I mean, you have your psychopaths who will do it, you have who really enjoy it, you have other young men who may be more like William, just want to fit in and feel they have to fit in, and this militia or this gang, provides the place for them to feel like they can have a family of a masculine sort. But the idea is that you make these young men participate in such egregious behaviors that over time they literally become, their brotherhood is founded in the guilt about these behaviors, these terrible rapes and killings, and that they become so awful. Which is why the song is so brilliant. There is no coming back. Once you have mutilated someone or chopped off their head or done appalling acts of sexual violence with guns and penises and everything else, you can't come back from that. And that solidifies the kind of internal terror of the soul of the individual soldier, but also solidifies the masculinity and the adherence to that group. And so I think there's so many. Can I just say I'm going to play this because I teach courses on sexual violence and conflict, and then also trying other courses on how societies might recover from conflict. But I'm going to play this because I think it's such a rich song. I can say something else, or do you want to respond?
No, I'd love to hear you more. I'd love.
So I just think it's excellent. So again, this is my first time listening to it. I'm ashamed that it is, but anyway, I thought it was so clever. Also, in the taking us to the victim is a mother, or his mother, and I think it's an interesting critique, but I'm not 100% sure. And I think what's brilliant about art is it's always it always has multiple interpretations depending on who's listening. There isn't just one interpretation. So I don't think it really matters whether it's meant to be what I'm about to say or not, because I think it still works, which is that one of the patriarchal arguments made in some of the, I think, weaker campaigns to stop sexual violence, rape, and one sees it's used in sort of in kind of international projects around the world, is what if it was your mother or your daughter? Would you rape if it was your mother or your daughter? And that has always struck me, and I'm sure others, as a very impoverished argument, because it's still seeing women, it's still placing women within the ambit of under control and a kind of patriarchal love even of men. And it shouldn't matter whether a woman is connected to you in some way, whether it's to make it horrifying. And so there's an interesting. There's an interesting film which I feel differently about every time I see it, which is about rape in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the use of sexual violence during the war. It's called The Greatest Silence. And again, I think I've come to realize it's a very good film, because every time I see it, I think differently. Either I want to throw something at the screen, or I think it's totally brilliant and has insights. Anyway, one of the scenes in that film, which I recommend, it's available, The Greatest Silence, is the director interviews some men who say yes, they have raped. They're members of the militia. They would exemplify this kind of brotherhood of guilt. And they make distinctions between the women they've raped and they argue that they had sexual needs and various other reasons, which you can also analyze. But one of the things they say, the question is, what if your mother or your daughter were raped? And then they immediately go, oh, well, I'd have to go and kill the person. So I just think that line about because it's back to the song, because it's the mother. Of course, it's his mother, which is actually a brilliant rhetorical strategy, because as you say, you can't come back from that. But I think it has a really interesting echo in, does it have to be your mother or your sister or your aunt or your daughter for both you, the perpetrator, and for society at large to kind of understand how terrible it is? Why can't women just as women or indeed, female identifying people be treated with respect? And so I think that's a very interesting thing to just think about in terms of analyzing that song.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre, and keep in mind, like, this is coming from somebody who is part of the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And even just yesterday, in my relationship with my partner, we had a discussion about just innate patriarchal things, like, without getting into the personal details of my marriage life, I said something that was just, and like, we're open enough that we go like, hey, that's a thing, but it's just like, it's like, even at this like stage of deconstructing and trying to just be mindful and aware of these things, I can still just, dehumanize somebody who I'm in such an intimate relationship with just words, but by accident. It's like it wasn't even like intended. But it's just so wild that hearing your perspective of it, because the way that I've interpreted this is that every time you do this sort of crime or this sort of act, you are doing it to the women in your life, whether directly or indirectly. However, I never like felt quite you know how there's like an intuitive sense where it's like, I don't know if that's really the best way to describe it. However, I'm gonna say, and this is gonna be kind of a long-winded point, and it's gonna kind of ramble, but so there's a song by Tyler Childers called Long Violent History, and he's a really great like sort of Americana country western musician, and he has an album that came out in 2020 called Long Violent History that is instrumental through every track until it gets to the last track, which I think it's the 9th track. But anyways, it's an all instrumental album, and it's really to showcase the first 8 tracks. The way that I hear it is it's to showcase that he knows his shit about Kentucky style bluegrass music, and he's like, he knows his shit how to play. To really get into the 9th song, which is Long Violent History. So you've been listening to this authentic bluegrass music, and it gets to this last song that has lyrics, and the lyrics are comparing the Battle of Blair Mountain, which was the famous labor strike with the United States Army and the miner workers in early 20th century, and comparing that to the struggles of Black Americans by police violence during the George Floyd protests. And the reason I've always been impressed by Tyler Childers is he is speaking to a demographic that is very reactionary towards the plight of people of color that live in the city. Yes. Where and basically he sets this entire thing up to get into the psychology of folks that would listen to his music, to be like, hey, like, you actually know what this is, and you shouldn't, we should be allies, we should be supporting and advocating against police violence, because you actually understand what's going on here. So all of that to say that the reason I'm bringing it up for this song is there's a part where, Immortal Technique from our perspective is still adhering to this patriarchal problem. However, the audience that he's speaking to, this might be the first time that they're even contemplating some of these things. And if you notice, he waits until he gets to the 3rd verse, because the reason I brought up Tyler Childers is where, Tyler Childers, he's basically showing his authentic musical skill in a particular like soundscape. It's the same with Immortal Technique. He basically proves that he's an excellent storyteller. He's an excellent MC. I mean, just on a musical note, one thing that's really wild is if you notice in the 3rd verse, he flips the rhyme pattern, because it used to be, like rhyme, or first line would rhyme with the 2nd line, and then the 3rd line would rhyme with the 4th line. But then in the 3rd verse, he eventually flips it, where all of a sudden it's one rhyme and then 2 rhymes and then 1 rhyme. So it ends up flip-flopping the entire rhyme scheme, which actually creates a psychological impact on, like, things are very uncomfortable suddenly because it's not landing the way it's supposed to. So he, like, shows that he is a very skilled rapper, two people that understand the craft that goes into this. And so anyways, all of that long-winded thing to say that I think that both can be correct, where it's, our perspective is accurate on the patriarchy, and the way that he is speaking is actually pretty dehumanizing to a certain extent. However, he's also speaking to a group of people that need to hear it this way, because. So
yeah, and I guess I didn't see it as dehumanizing. I think it's really, and there's no easy answer to this. It's really about political strategy in some respect. Is how it's always that issue of how far. If you get too pragmatic and accommodate too much, or use the tools of the oppressor, can you really, break down the master's house? You know what I mean? Or dear Lord. And so what, in gesturing to this is my mother, I actually think it's so extreme that it works. It's not a mother. I think it's horror. It's shock and it's horror. I think does the work it's supposed to do. And underneath it, I just think it's interesting that that's the schema that even in a work of critique, which I think is brilliant. And maybe that is the brilliance of it, is he's able to use the kind of patriarchal schema in a way that is actually horrific, as opposed to kind of justifying. So, I am really, really impressed. Can I just rewinding away back to your point about Tyler Childers' song, which I also need to listen to, obviously. It got me thinking, when I was thinking about what we might, where this conversation might go, I was thinking about, the sexual violence always exists in particular cultural forms. It is pervasive, and it's depressing how it seems to appear. It doesn't really matter where you are in the world. Particularly violence against women and trans people seems to just be, the thing that happens. Having said that, how it gets experienced and sort of activated, clearly is deeply sort of rooted in the local. And so I was thinking earlier, about how historians in particular have sort of been thinking about sort of sexual violence in these settler colonial cultures, or white supremacist cultures, whatever you want to say, and it actually leads me to what you were saying about Tyler Childers. Have got me thinking about that, which is that so often sexual violence gets mobilized in kind of political ways exactly when the rights of particular groups are threatened. And so what you were saying about kind of a sort of Appalachian white political consciousness that sees itself as antithetical to a black consciousness, or black urban consciousness in particular, does in a way have a kind of a genealogy back to Reconstruction, where after the Civil War, the federal government came in and said, okay, we are giving at least black men rights, the vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was an incredible concern on the part of the former slaveholding elite that there would in fact now be a kind of a class coalition of poorer white, smaller farmers and, freed people that would actually result in a real threat to the kind of the economic status of former slaveholders. And you get the rise of Jim Crow precisely certainly about limiting the rights of African Americans and everything else, but it was also about cutting through any possibility of a class solidarity. And so I think the way the sexual violence got narrated was also very much part of that. So lynching, as Ida B. Wells told us very early on in her, and I really recommend, she's the journalist who really, I think, first really analysed lynching as a product of really of white supremacy, but also as within a framework of gender, was that lynching was about obviously killing African Americans, it was also about disciplining, and sexual violence and the threats of sexual violence, in particular narrations of sexual violence, was a way that was all kind of managed, so that there was a fear that white women, there was a kind of a need to discipline white women's sexuality, so they wouldn't, God forbid, fall in love with, walk away from whiteness with black men. And it was also to discipline black men and black communities, so that lynching was so often narrated as actually a narration about a solution to a black man raping a white woman. That was the trope that got mobilized, and was incredibly effective because sexual violence, again, so often reaches into these issues of control over women, over communities. And so I just think that just got me thinking when you were talking about the long violent histories, that there's all sorts of ways that a history that can look like it's about economics or about politics or about race can also, and maybe always, is also a story about gender and violence, and the way that sexual violence is mobilized by elites to discipline communities and really to discipline political imaginings and futures.
Yeah. So it just, I think this is also just a testament about how important the arts are for communicating ideas, because, you haven't even heard long violent history and you're already talking about just the deeper concepts behind it. Just by, talking just briefly about what the song's about. So, it's really, really, really amazing just how it impacts human consciousness. Mm-hmm. I did want to ask one thing about this story that I find so sociopolitically relevant is that he wants to, become harder, like throughout the song. In fact, like the very beginning, it's that he snitched when he was arrested the first time. And so he now almost has to put in extra work to prove that he's he's real. And, there's the lyric where Tech, which by the way, like fans of Immortal Technique, you just call him Tech. Okay. But there's the line where he says, it's in the second verse, where they said, they told him any motherfucking coward can sell drugs, any N-word with a gun can cast slugs. So it's literally saying anyone can do this kind of violence. But to prove who you are, you have to be able, he said, it says only a real thug can stab someone till they die, standing in front of them, staring straight into their eyes. And it then gets to basically, they're the only thing you can do to prove it is you have to sexually assault an innocent person. Yeah. And it's just, so all of that to say is, what is your take on the weaponization of sexual violence? Because I've got too many thoughts already. But yeah, I'm just what are your thoughts on why these men chose to give him this mission, essentially to prove himself?
Well, I'd love to hear your thoughts. We know empirically that is often a way of consolidating belonging to gangs. That is often the thing that is required, is that you go and you rape or you kill a woman. So empirically, yes. And I think, and again, not just in America, I think it is, there's something, I'm trying to think. It's sort of Janus-faced. On the one, I don't know if that's the right word. On the one hand, women are held up as, individuals to be protected, or a class of people to be protected, or let's say white women particularly, but so on the one hand, there's this women, you're a real man if you have women under your care and your protection. That's how you demonstrate you're a real man. On the other hand, women are also not quite citizens, not quite human in the kind of full sense. And so they occupy this kind of liminal position between being, seen as fully human and enjoying all that, entitled to everything about being human individual and citizenship. But there's something about them that is also always just not quite right. And so I think what's really interesting in that part there is just how quickly you go from, how quickly women become the other that actually can be discarded. But there's something, if women were so lacking in value, it wouldn't be worth killing them. So I think there's something about this kind of ambivalence about exactly the place that women occupy, their role, in fact, as mothers, that is both scary and need to be dominated. And yes, I think there's something really interesting going on there, which is, if women weren't on some level seen as also necessary, they wouldn't be so valued in showing that you could kill them. And I think, theorists, from Simone de Beauvoir to a whole bunch of other people, can talk about that in a more kind of psychological, psychodynamic way than I can. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's almost like the concept of womanhood is a commodity in a patriarchal society. And so it's almost viewed as if it's your property, you cherish it, but if it's your rival's property, you try to damage it. And it's I'm intentionally using the word "it" now, just because, yeah.
But can I just
sure?
Yes, and because if women are your property, they also have to be, in this way, I'm not sure property is correct. Anyway, property might be the right word, but it's like, yes, you will look after them, protect them as long as they do what you want, because, that's where intimate partner violence comes from, is that, yes, my wife is my property, but I don't like the way she did the dishes tonight, so I'm going to hit her. So there's always that rub, I think. I think the thing that's so scary about patriarchy / misogyny, back to your point about your conversation with your partner, is how it exists. It sort of seeps into everything. So, for example, as a professor, I teach young people, and really nice young people. I remember a conversation with an extraordinarily nice young man who was telling the class, it's about sexual violence, about how he and friends in high school had spread a rumor about a young woman that, she was, sleeping around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it wasn't true, but it was because she had refused to go out with him. And so he spread this rumor that then kind of basically, and as he was telling the story, and I really liked him and came to, respect him. But I had to kind of stop the class and say, but can you imagine what they did to that young woman's high school career? And he said, yes, no, everybody thought she was a slut. It's like, and that's because she wouldn't go out with you. And he came to sort of, I could see him pause in a way that he hadn't quite thought through the implications of what was a kind of a tasteless joke that was a way of just like establishing that he didn't really care and he would just kind of get her back. But again, a very nice young man who I think grew up to be someone quite, wonderful. And yet in the culture are these ways of behaving and dissing women in a way that doesn't even rise to the surface unless you start unpacking it, which is why I really will make a plug for the importance of gender analysis in schools and colleges. It's just so important.
Yeah, it's like, just in that example, she didn't give him what he wanted, so he created a rumor that really shouldn't matter in and of itself anyways, if she's a sexually active individual.
Yeah, precisely.
But there's just such a hostile environment for people who are like, who are I don't even know what the right word is, but people who are explorers, sexual explorers. But so first off, it shouldn't have mattered if it was true or not.
Exactly.
But then secondly, he knew that would actually have an impact on her social life.
Yeah. I do want to make a plug. There's I can't think what her name is, but there's a woman who goes under the sort of sign of feminist teacher who does a lot of work in high schools. And she certainly used to be in New York. And I think that kind of work is so important in helping students learn to sort of talk about gender, talk about patriarchy. And also, of course, patriarchy wouldn't be so tenacious if all of us, including women, didn't somehow participate. So it is about trying to get us all to understand the structures in which we're living and how we are, how all of us can reproduce a structure without almost being, without being aware of it. Which is now just another book. There's a really great book came out a long time ago called Dislocating Cultures by Narayan. And I can send you these if you want. And it's a wonderful book. She's a philosopher, and it's her wrestling with, she's from India, and it's her wrestling with the meaning of feminism, having grown up in India. And her argument is that feminism and kind of a gender analysis does have a kind of trans-historical heft, even as we have to be, very attuned to the local. You don't want to become a kind of a gender feminist imperialist. But one of the things she argues is that understanding patriarchy and having a gendered analysis allowed her to see how in her own family, for example, her grandmother, who was her father's mother, was really horrible to her mother, who sort of married into the family. And growing up, all she could think was that her grandmother was a horrible human being. But once she'd understood, once she got sort of started reading about, feminism and patriarchy and et cetera, she realized, of course, that the only power that her grandmother had was as mother of the son, and that those really sort of mean things she did to her mother, the author's mother, were in fact a kind of a symptom of patriarchy, in which women start operating particular kind of roles. Anyway, I just want to say, I think finding languages that we can begin to talk about some of this stuff, just as, the language around racism and white supremacy, allow us to kind of really start beginning to unpack and understand how we can all be complicit. It's not about necessarily pointing fingers, although of course there are some fingers to be pointed at some people.
Yes. Yeah. I mean that's just in regards to the point you just made. One thing I've been trying to just focus on in regards to communicating with different people from different locations. I in a weird way, I've actually stopped saying white supremacists to regard neo-Nazis and people involved in like the KKK or anything like that, and have started referring to them as white power activists, because it's almost just like when speaking with people, you say like we're a white supremacist culture, they will immediately jump to the like, well, I'm not a Nazi, and it's like, yes. Never said you were a Nazi, yes. Didn't even imply it. Yes. It is a white. Like the definition of white has changed already. Yeah. Like it's watching it change right before our eyes again. I actually just on that regards, like there are a lot of conservative and even all the way to fascist, people of color that have popped up, like Candace Owens or Jesse Lee Peterson, or any of these folks that pop up. It's interesting because it's like they're being welcomed into the space, enough to be able to push an agenda, but it's just it just kind of shows how complex things are, and what will the definition of white be 100 years from now? Like, will it be even anything we recognize? But anyways, all of that to say that it's very similar in regards to the patriarchy, because saying male privilege, or saying just speaking in these sorts of ways, men will get very, very cagey. And first off, I think it's important to call people out and to shed light on things. However, just in regards to the fact that the goal is to try to add just a little bit of political education into people's minds, where it's like this might not impact you for a long time, but it will impact your kids, and that the next generation might be in a better spot. I'll just put it this way. Like, I have a cousin who's like very right-wing, very, conservative Christian, very reactionary in his politics. And yet, he's younger than I am. He's like 10 years younger. He left the church that he grew up in because they were homophobic. And like, in a weird way, it's like, I find most of his views atrocious. But like, there's a part where it's like, all right, like, I'm glad to hear that. Like, I'd rather you, leave a church for being homophobic than, being like staying in the group. Yeah. And so it's an interesting thing how, you can have just these complicated experiences, and yeah.
I think, one of the things, as a original immigrant, I guess, to this country, I'm sort of struck by in American, and I'm not saying it's always been the case, but, since I've been here, is we have such an impoverished public understanding of structure and of history. And we see this both in the way we relate, as a large American culture, to relate to, foreign policy, I guess. We don't know where any place in the world is until America touches it in a war or something. No one could have put Afghanistan on a map until we got involved there. Where was Iraq, et cetera, et cetera. But we tend to do it around individuals. So, and we have, I really am struck by how poorly, what a very poor historical understanding most of us have about American history in every respect. And so I think just as a kind of a cultural artifact, thinking about larger structures like capitalism or patriarchy or white settler colonial cultures or whatever, I actually think is a kind of an analytic muscle that isn't well used in America. If you go to, for example, South Africa or even the UK, or well, not even the UK, but the UK or Europe, people are much more familiar with sort of just basic, Marxist analysis. And not that you have to be Marxist to be able to understand structures, but there's just a kind of familiarity with a range of different ways. They're more, interpreting the world. And so I think, I just think that in general, as a contemporary culture, we have very thin analytic tools at our disposal. And I'm really impressed, actually, by AOC in the way she is just so clever, the way she can, she's just really clever, but she's able to kind of harness some of that kind of terrain of deeper analytic, of analytic sort of heft, I guess, but be able to put it in a really easy way to understand, and has, good sound bites and everything. I think she's brilliant. But I do think just generally we, as a make a broad sweep of, generalization. I think as a culture, America tends to focus on individual successes, individual failures, and getting people to understand deep economic and social and cultural and racial, sexual, whatever structures is actually just not, it feels almost foreign, I think, in this country. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it's as somebody who's grown up here, and has experienced many different just living locations, grew up in the Midwest, was in the military, all those things. Historical literacy is not a popular thing to do here in the States, and I can speak just directly on some of the things that I heard growing up, even as recently as I remember in 2008 hearing members of my family talk about Barack Obama as basically a Joseph Stalin level socialist Marxist, and I believed them because I was young and didn't know any better myself. And of course, fast forward many years, and it's like Barack Obama's a capitalist and a liberal. Like he's like nowhere near any form of socialism, let alone like a very principled Marxist Leninist or anything like that. So it's just but I mean, I'm not going to say everybody in my hometown thinks that, but pretty large amount of people from there have that just understanding on what socialism is and what fascism is. And I mean, we talk about it a lot on here, how just even the understanding of that fascism is not just 1930s Germany. Like there are, there were fascists. What was his name? Oscar Mosley or Oliver Mosley, but he was in England. Like he was like setting up to be a Mussolini. He didn't succeed, but his form of fascism is different than Mussolini's fascism, which is different than Franconian fascism, which is different than Pinochet's fascism, and it just a lot of folks don't realize that there are many forms of fascism, and it's not just a you see what it is and you just know that's it, and it's only that. And it aligns with everything that's in this song, where I mean, we had to learn that here, I know how to summarize it because I've been wanting to get to this lyric in a minute. So in the last verse, he says, the thing that I love what he does is, so tech really gets us to the place where this is such a horrible crime, mm-hmm. and no one could imagine doing this. And yet in the very last verses, the last couple lines, he goes, "'Cause I was there with Billy Jacobs and I raped his mom too. And now the devil follows me everywhere that I go. In fact, I'm sure he's standing among one of you at my shows and every street cipher listening to Little Thugs flow." So then this next line is, "He could be standing right next to you. You wouldn't know. The devil grows inside the hearts of the selfish and wicked. White, brown, yellow, and black color is not restricted. You have a self-destructive destiny when you're inflicted, and you'll be one of God's children that fell from the top. There's no diversity because we're burning in the melting pot. So when the devil comes to dance with you, you better say never, because a dance with the devil might last you forever." And I love that he's like, by the way, I'm the devil too. Oh, and you're the devil too. And not even, it can, white, brown, yellow, black, color is not restricted. Like, it's just, you do not have to be, commit something as horrible as Billy Jacobs does in this song, to still not be, impacted by the metaphorical devil's influence.
It's
Yeah.
It's really he is brilliant. I wrote when I was listening for the very first time. I wrote down, you'll be one of God's children that fell from the top. There's no diversity because we're burning in the melting pot. I mean, he's also taking these tropes of the greatness of America. We're all melting pot and it's all like equal in diversity and we'll all rise together and all that rubbish. And there's, I'm assuming there are books devoted to this singer. It's brilliant, and I hope there are articles because this is there's a critique of capitalism, there's a critique of the American dream, there is the centrality of misogyny to all of that. There is terror, there is monstrousness, and you're not sure where the monstrousness lies because it's not just in Billy. It's, as you say, in everyone.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any books on him. There really should be. I'll just I know we're at the hour mark, so I don't want to keep you, but if you would be down to do just a sort of a deep dive into actually the artist himself and even some of the structure of this song, I thought I'd be interested to hear your take on this. So first and foremost, Immortal Technique, one thing that I find interesting, and I'm going to ask you right off the top, do you have any assumptions of what the ethnicity is of Billy Jacobs in the song?
Of Billy Jacobs in the song. That's really interesting. I hadn't actually.
Yeah.
I thought because of the use of one version of the N-word, that Immortal Technique was probably black, but I hadn't thought about. I think because it's the first time I've listened to it. So much going on here. I guess I would have just assumed also black, but there's really nothing to say necessarily that he is, right?
Yeah. So it's this is actually something I was like processing in our dialogue because I actually have only pictured a black man in this entire story. Immortal Technique is he would be considered a dark-skinned person, but he's actually Peruvian. He's a brown-skinned individual. But all that being said, it's just the sort of the vernacular he uses and the setting he paints. Like, you really do get this image of a young African-American man, and therefore the crew is also African-American and his mother as well. It's like there's just an image that's what is being spoken about, which I find that really, really interesting, just in and of itself, that we sort of have these assumptions without even knowing a thing. I'll actually, just to go back to the long violent history talk, like even just in our dialogue, like I think that I made a point to say Kentucky music, and on the reflection it was white working class versus urban black, and it's interesting how we project these images onto things in sort of this undercurrent way. So that's just one interesting thing I wanted to point out. But anyways, Immortal Technique, he's I have a lot of respect for him, just because I know that I believe it was an armed robbery that he went to prison for, and he really developed his political study as well as his hip hop craft while inside. And when he came out, he's a felon now, and he just got involved in a lot of the battle rap culture in Harlem, and just dominated. Like he really was, and we've talked about it in past podcasts, how hip hop battle raps are almost like verbal boxing matches where it
Yeah.
sounds horrible what they're saying to each other, except, in a certain lens, like boxing is two people being incredibly violent to each other, but because of the setting, it's actually like okay. And it's kind of the same with the hip hop battle rap, where these two individuals say just awful things to each other, but it's in like a handshake sort of forum, and there's an audience who cheers and boos and all of those things. So he really just dominated the hip hop battle rap scene in Harlem for years before he recorded his first album. The other thing is a lot of his music is very politically conscious. So there's there are some songs, like he has a song called "The Poverty of Philosophy" that is basically a Marxian analysis of the Atlantic slave trade, and he's got some really subtle lyrics in that one.
What's it called? The poverty?
The philosophy of poverty, or the poverty of philosophy is the name of it. It's the same album actually, but yeah, and I'm just I'm completely being sarcastic when I said he's got subtle lyrics. Immortal Technique is not known for his subtlety at all. But alongside with just the sort of educational elements of his music, he's independent, so he's never been signed to a record label. So he's completely self-produced, and this is it was intentionally a reaction to what he was seeing happen with Jay-Z or Snoop Dogg or any of these more mainstream artists. And by the way, I have no beef with any of that in and of itself. However, I appreciate that he can talk about anything he wants to, because he owns his rights. He owns his intellectual property. But he's also a really amazing on the grounds activist. So he funded and still funds an orphanage in Afghanistan for children who died whose parents died due to Western imperialist bombings. So that's a part of him. I didn't speak to him, but I was in a bar with him once because there was so there's a couple of layers to this. I'm friends with a lot of people involved in a radical union known as the IWW, and the IWW has a specific branch called IWOC, which is the Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee. I think that's what it is, but they are really working on union organizing for prison laborers. But anyways, one thing they do is when people get released, they host parties, and I went to one of the parties. It was, first off, it was fun, but Immortal Technique showed up, and he rapped, and it was, it's the kind of thing where, like, you can listen to his music and it's great and you can enjoy it, but when you see it live, it's like this dude's on like another plane of something. He knows how to communicate to the audience. He knows how to show respect. He literally just was there to pump the crowd up, and then he stepped off stage and didn't participate any further. Just handed the mic over to like a lot of the dudes who are not professional rappers, and they had a concert that was completely self-sustained and everything. But it was just like, he's very cool because he'll show up to events like that and just make sure he can offer his support in any way.
That's so nice to call out, people who do the right thing in that way are rare, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's the other thing where we get this a lot with the folks we work with at Rikers Island, where like some of the contemporary hip hop music, the drill rap, like when I first heard it, like I'm somebody who has listened to lots of music, but like listened to a lot of Immortal Technique, at various stages of my life, and there's some drill rap out where the lyrics offend me, and
well, you know what? That just means you're getting old.
Yes, that's exactly what it means, because I literally had to deprogram, it was like, oh, right, the music that I think is hip and cool is old people music for some of these guys. But anyways, all of that to say that I didn't like drill music at first because it was too violent and too blunt, and then really started to take it seriously because so many of the people we work with, this is the music they listen to. And there is something about being in a room with 40, 50 dudes who know every word and they're just all in a trance, their eyes are closed, all of those things. And anyways, all of that to say that I really encourage people should go see Immortal Technique live, because he plays local clubs all the time. He's not as disconnected, I think, as some more mainstream artists.
Well, I mean, I expected my eyes to be opened a bit in this conversation. I didn't expect to be completely blown away. I'm immediately after this, I'm going to contact my son, who is a music. I mean, he's a music, a collector of various stuff, but also music, and I'm sure he will know Immortal Technique. But I'm looking forward to a conversation with him as well. This was, and I will be using this in a class for sure. I mean, even as a kind of a prompt, I think it, as given the wide range of this conversation, even if I'm teaching a class which I tend to on sort of sexual violence in the 1990s or something in Yugoslavia and South Africa and Rwanda, I think we could use this. This could be the first class and just have it raises so many issues that you can go down a deep dive into theory, into place, into comparisons between the United States and other places. It's brilliant. And then also, as you were saying, the power of the arts is people underestimate it. This is really brilliant. I'm so glad you introduced me to.
Yeah. Well, and so the last part just about this song is that the sample that it's taken from is the love theme. Theme from Love Story, which is the.
That's why I recognize it.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
Think of that movie is about. An upper class man and a working class woman, and they fall in love and go through hard times because his family will not accept her, but he gets married with her anyways, and she ends up getting diagnosed with cancer and spoiler alert, dying at the end of the film. And there's the quote, it's love means never having to say you're sorry. And so somebody like Immortal Technique, and I really should know this. I'm not sure who the DJ was who did the beats on this record off the top of my head, but there's intellect to have that iconic theme be in the beat, but it gets a notch deeper because there's the lyric. They sample. It's a Mobb Deep song called Survival of the Fittest, and they sample one lyric and just repeat it in the song between verse 3 and verse 4, which is I'm fallen and I can't turn back. So there's and then the last sample is every once in a while you hear in the chorus somebody go, ah! That's a sample from Think About It by Ling Collins, which is, so there's just so much, even in the way that I always kind of think about lyrical content and instrumental music is the lyrical content is the conscious mind, and the instrumental is almost the unconscious. And there's just something that even in the beat, there's just so much thought into every step of it to make you as uncomfortable as possible.
That is testimony to brilliance, actually, when there are so many layers to unpack. Before we go, I just want to say, the singer Stromae?
No, I don't.
Okay, I'm going to just put this in the chat. Stromae.
Stromae. Okay.
Yeah, so his name is actually Paul Panhaber, but he's known as Stromae, which is actually a kind of anagram of maestro. And he's actually been in the States, and he is fantastic. And he's got this video out, but I can't remember the name of the video, but a student showed me to, and we discussed it in class because it's so brilliant. And it's about sexual violence, and it does this kind of I'll send you subsequent links to the video because it's brilliant. It's like orchestrated. The conceit is it's a funeral for a sex worker. And it has the leaders of the world coming to this like state funeral for a sex worker, and it has the kind of narrative potential of Immortal Technique's song. But anyway, it's really excellent, and it's contemporary, and I really, really recommend it. His mother's Belgian and his father's Rwandan, who was killed during the genocide. He was an architect, but it's really, really good. And he was in the States. I think he played in Madison Square Garden last year.
Oh.
But he's worth. Wow. He's really also like creative. I mean, I love people who just feel like, oh my God, they've just blown the box off. What you thought was possible, they just go and do something totally different. Anyway, I'll send you a link.
No, thank you for that. And we'll put all of this in the show notes, so people can check all of these things out. So I guess just one recommendation to throw at you before we close out as well is just because you had mentioned the sex worker. There's a song by Kendrick Lamar on his album Good Kid, Mad City called "Sing About Me," and I think it's the second verse, which is from the point of view of a sex worker, and it's a very empathetic perspective. The song I think it's 3 verses, and each verse is about a different person who's going through just a challenging kind of moment in their life. But the thing that I love about this song is it's not so much about where this Immortal Technique song, there's like an entire universe that we're learning about. The Sing About Me, it's more about just sort of the moment that it's like a slice of life kind of moment, but about really just intense topics from people who don't normally have a voice. And Kendrick is also a brilliant lyricist.
He at least I can say I've heard of.
Yeah. He's fascinating because he's mainstream in just like record sales, but I think he's still very much an underground rapper in heart. So is there anything if people wanted to follow you or find out what you do, where can people go?
I'm on Twitter though since the Elon Musk attempt to buy it up. I felt a little less eager about Twitter, but they can find me on Twitter at Pamela Scully. I lurk on Instagram as feminist professor, but I'm not particularly. I go there to fangirl over Bridgerton. But if people want to find me, they can do Pamela Scully at Twitter, and if they email. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah. It's been really a pleasure, and I've learned a lot. And I really appreciate your podcast. So thank you for doing it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. And again, my name is Dorian Wallace. Send your good thoughts to Dee Marisa as she's out in I'll just say out in the field, supporting somebody who needs support. Again, this is Mederi Music. Thank you so much, Pamela, for coming on and speaking to us. One thing that we're really interested in is talking to people who have insights into things and, applying a musical lens through it. Just because there's, there's very much a Western notion that there are people who are musical and there are people who are not musical. Like the amount of times I hear people say, "Oh, I'm tone deaf," or "I have no rhythm." It's like you have tone and rhythm, you just haven't exercised it, and you're in a culture that has convinced you that you're not musical because you're not, performing. So anyways, thank you so much for joining us. And again, y'all can support us on Patreon. You can follow us on all of the social medias. And with that, we'll catch you later.
Thank you.